Awesome.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I'll call the meeting to order at 4:02. We have on the agenda to welcome Walter Fowler, but he is not here, so I will follow up with him separately and see if he's able to join our next meeting. Next up is approval of the minutes from May 11th, 2020. Does anyone want to make a motion to approve?
Make a motion to approve the minutes of last month.
Great. Anyone want to second?
I'll second it.
Thanks, Jacob. All those, I think the way we did it last time is we just did opposed. Is that right? And if no one opposed, everybody was in favor?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody opposed? Great. Let's move on. I know we have a couple of folks here, attendees. So does anyone want to address the commission? Topics from the floor? No, not Claire. Okay. Patrick?
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Do you
Welcome.
hear me?
We can hear you and we can see you.
Okay, very good. So hi everybody and happy June. Two quick things. First, I just wanted to share a couple of book titles with you. These were actually given to me at a Kiwanis meeting by Lynn Quixote with the St. Helens Garden Club. And there are a couple of books that the Oregon Federation of Garden Clubs is distributing. And I read both of them this summer. I highly recommend them as they're related to the work of the Parks and Trails. And I just want to share the titles and the names and would recommend them highly. One is called Last Child in the Woods, Saving Our Children from Nature Deficit Disorder by Richard Louv, L-O-U-V. And a book that complements that very much is called Balanced and Barefoot, How Unrestricted Outdoor Play Makes for Strong, Confident, and Capable Children. And it actually, as a teacher, it kind of made me feel a little bit guilty about some ways that I have taught in the classroom in the past. Maybe not guilty, but that I did not have the opportunity to expose my students to nature in more different ways. Anyway, I highly recommend these books to you to read, and they might be of interest to your important work with parks and trails, about just how important it is, not only to the, not just nice to get outside because it's a nice thing to do, because it can make a fundamental difference in the health and safety of our community in a number of ways. So, Last Child in the Woods and Balanced and Barefoot. That last one was written by Angela Hanscom, H-A-N-S-C-O-M. And then the second thing was I was actually inspired by a Facebook post I saw with Howard, where he was named as a park steward. And I know that maybe that was kind of an informal title, but it made me wonder if that is something the Parks and Trails Commission or even the city might consider some ways of designating and honoring the group of volunteers, and I know who do work in our parks, by designating them as Parks and Trail Stewards, so that members of the various friends groups, or even if someone's not a member of a friends group, but just a citizen who wants to contribute to the upkeep and development of our parks, as one way of recognizing that work. And I know in previous discussions with this and with the City Council, how we can recognize volunteers ways so that if they're working in the community, others can easily identify them as people who have been given permission by the city to do these kinds of works, and a way to just publicize the work of people. So that's just something maybe think about in the future, some kind of informal or maybe a little more formal way of recognizing the good work our volunteers do as stewards of parks and trails. So you can mute me now and I'll listen in to the rest of the meeting. Thanks.
Thank you, Patrick, for those suggestions. I think that's a good idea to do the park steward. I know I haven't heard us talk about that before, just about the Friends of groups. So I think that would be interesting to discuss more and what we think would classify somebody as a park steward. I don't know if anyone else has thoughts on it.
Well, that's what I've always thought of myself as in Nob Hill. I until that moment, I guess I'd never thought about that. Maybe I needed to ask if I can call myself a park steward. So I hope I haven't overstepped my boundaries on that one. So
Yeah, I think it's great, and I think it would be a good way to recognize people. I think it's a good idea. I just don't know that we have anything formal in place.
correct.
But
Correct.
okay. All right. If there are no other topics from the floor,
Yeah, Claire is muted, so I just wanted to make sure she didn't have something to say. And then I'm not sure who Ryan is. That's he's displayed, but also muted. I'm not able to unmute him, and I'm not sure if that's somebody that wanted to say anything or.
okay. I think Claire said she didn't have anything. Is that right?
No, thank you, Sue. I'm just listening in. Thanks.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Same. This is Ryan Kilgren, and I'm a civil water resources engineer and work on parks and planning projects with a company called Tetra Tech. And I saw your meeting was available through this web interface, and I was curious to listen in and learn. So I was just trying to be a fly on the wall. That's who I am and why I'm here.
Okay.
Great. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for sharing that, Ryan. Appreciate it.
All right. So next on the agenda, we have the counselor's report. Doug, do you want to provide updates?
Sure. Thank you. And welcome, Patrick and Claire and Ryan as well. It's always nice to have other individuals in our visiting our commission, and to me that's very encouraging. Patrick, I was taken with your report on stewardship of parks, and I think that kind of following up Carmen's remarks, I think that dovetails very, very specifically into what a Friends of Parks entails. And it could be a huge part of our ongoing definition of how we define friends of. And as we all know, that's kind of a thing that we've been tossing around, and I do think that we do have some verbiage on that now. But it would be, I think, quite important to update that. And talking about updating, understand everyone has a master plan for parks and trails. Is that correct? Is there anyone who is on the Parks Commission who does not have one of those by chance as a resource? We all have them. And probably Walder, I don't know if Walder has one in his possession or not. Do you know, Sue?
I don't know offhand. I believe that there was one waiting for him downstairs, but I don't know if he has picked that up.
All right. So moving forward, my only business is thinking about what in your specific parks that you're responsible for, or that you'd like to report on, or not really responsible, but have an allegiance to, and think about again, think about any upgrades that you would really like to see with the master plan, as well as going over the entire master plan for the parks, and possibly brainstorming in one of our sessions of what it is in vision that you foresee the parks moving towards. And I think that's important. I think it's going to be important to have in the report that you give to the council. I just think it's timely to start those things and keep that activity going on old business on the agenda from now on out. The only thing I have to report is I'm very, very eager to see and I'm sure you heard this. I don't know if I reported on it or not. I might have left this off. But Columbia View Park will expand to the south, and those are all plans to have an expansion that way. And I'm very eager to see what those and possibly be a part of the working with that, representing the city along with Sue, John Walsh, and others in terms of where the line will be drawn from where the development starts. And the developer, as you probably know, Dwight Untie, will be bidding on that parcel, and he is very anxious to kind of get moving on it as well. But his recommendation was to make a bigger park out of Columbia View Park, and that was the developer. That was the developer to move south down to a point where Gracie's, I think, was in that area, and prior to just in his preliminary workup. So anyway, that's all I've got to report. And I'm just looking forward to seeing that get penciled out, and so we can move forward. Any questions for the counselor?
I have a question about the Columbia View Park expansion. Is there somewhere where there's a document where that's outlined? I hadn't seen that, so I was curious for more information.
There is not a document in a sense that is a plan.
Right.
There's conceptual ideas floating around. There's a big difference between the two.
Yeah.
The conceptual ideas are kinds of brainstorms of what can happen and whatever. And maybe Sue, if we can get our hands on anything that has any kind of concepts that Dwight left for us, it would be maybe good to share that with the commission. I just want to caution though that in terms of weighing in before there's a plan given to the developer or he has a chance to have an open hearing, I would kind of wait for all those things to funnel in before we start beating on our chest saying we want this, we want that, or we think this should happen, or we should think that should happen. That's all I would caution, even though I think you're all the most valuable assets we have to ideas and expansion. So that's just I just kind of thought I'd throw that in because I'm eager to see where we're going to go with that. And I'm so happy that a developer of all people came forward and said, why don't you use this land instead of for what I want to develop, but use it for a park and expand what you have there from Columbia View Park down to the south. So I was very happy about that.
Doug, I have a question.
Who?
Go ahead, Jerry.
Jerry, what do you got?
My question is always on the trails, Doug. You know, the trail that's going along there. So is the developer responsible for the part of the trail that's in his plot of that he gets, or is the trail totally it's penciled in there, and then the city then builds the trail?
It'd be more than a trail, Jerry. From what I understand, it's going to be more of a trail / boardwalk, a right-of-way, a pathway of some sort. And it depends on the grant again. If we get the anywhere from a $13 million to a $10 million grant, then I'm sure the first portion, the first stage of that will be more of a boardwalk, more of something that is very permanent, and then that will be on the city's. That'd be up to the city to finance that in conjunction with the developer. So those talks have to be straightened around. There's nothing drawn, no lines drawn in the sand at this moment. So as things move forward, we pick the developer, and I'm sure to be Dwight Untie and the person who had the first bid from Tokalo Properties. So I can't answer that specifically.
But that's not a part of the description. So it's the city that's going to build the boardwalk. So the developer could start developing his land, and then the area that's along the river could not be developed if the city doesn't have a grant.
No, it isn't a grant, because and Sue, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the vision of the council to get phase one finished, and that would be on that first division of that property, which I think is about 5 acres of property. And so how that proceeds, I'm not certain, Jerry. I can't say that the city's specifically going to do this or that, or plans are. The concepts is that the boardwalk will go over the rickrack in some places and out over the water in some places, and then come back onto the landmass. Mm-hmm. So all of that is conceptual at this point.
Yeah, and Councilor Morton is right. That is definitely a vision of the council. Though we have been tentatively approved for a grant that will help construct the very beginning of that in the existing Columbia View Park area, and potentially expand it slightly to the south. On the Tokala conceptual design for the development of the veneer property that Councilor Morton was referring to, they just show a general area all the way down from the existing Columbia View Park, down past where Gracie's was. And they just say park. They're not showing any development in that area. They're just saying they would like to see that as park area.
So it's possible that the development could get all built and there'd just still be a gravel trail there in front of there.
Well, that's a possibility, but there has not been any development agreement with anybody yet, but likely when that happens, they will be required to do some portion of that frontage improvement or have it incorporated into their design in some way. That's absolutely going to be set aside, whether or not there's the funding or the the legal ability to make them build a portion of it. I mean, that's all negotiable. So that's something that the council and that developer will have to determine what part they may have in building that. But the city's actively going after other funding. And again, we've tentatively been approved for a grant to at least get that process started, and the first part of that.
So Sue, I know that this is probably in the future, but have you or any of the designers, city planners thought about the actual design of that boardwalk? I know Doug's talked about it.
There's been a lot of thought of all different kinds of potential concepts, something like Councilor Martin was saying, something that meandered and actually extended over the water and back onto the land. Years ago, we had a design for a boardwalk that was just along the frontage of the existing developed park. But I can tell you, just the railings cost like $200,000 just for a rail. That didn't include any of the geotechnical work or any of the actual boardwalk itself. So yeah, we didn't have funding to be able to do that. But we have some conceptual designs, and then, you know, as that process moves forward, there'll be the input from, I'm sure, lots of different.
So Sue, one of the things I was thinking about, you know, when the developers start developing that, if there's not a design, maybe the city council could require them to put in a sidewalk type trail until the city gets, you know.
Jerry, I don't want, the council does not want to get ahead of of how this is going to work until talks come around and say, okay, we're going to do that.
Yeah.
But I do agree with you in terms of being fearful of having a developer come in and then having our riverfront just sit there because there's no money to do anything. So as this develops, that's one of the reasons that we listened to Dwight, and he suggested that we sectioned the property into 6 different sections so that the city can, quote unquote, afford to develop as the developers develop along. So hopefully with various funds that we'll be able to work through that. With negotiations with the developer, we'll have to work through that. Nothing has been signed yet, so we can't make any deals, we can't make any plans, can't make any things that saying, okay, we're going to do this or we're going to do that, or the city's going to do this, city's going to do that, until it gets to a point before a public hearing or comes to the council. And believe me, the first thing that would happen from my point of view is activate our Parks Commission and activate our Parks Commission to weigh in on what they see and what your vision is as well, because a good portion of that is going to be the expansion of Columbia View Park. And that's going to be, I think, extremely important, what we want for that vision. So it's all up in the air for right now. And hopefully we can proceed with caution.
And I've got a question also on all that. Didn't we have something from a group of students or something from Portland State a couple of years ago who did some things?
Yes, Patrick's sent a message to everybody. If you look in your chat box, if you're able to pull that up. But yes, he mentioned that, and they did have a few different conceptual designs, but there's also been a lot of changes to the downtown, and then of course this development of the potential development of the near property there that may impact how we're able to develop that. But you're absolutely right, Howard. There was a PSU student group that did some master planning and came up with some different designs there.
And boy, did we use some of their ideas, because we used their ideas in the wayfinding. We used their ideas in historic buildings. We've used quite a few of their ideas in certain aspects. So anyway, I hope that answers your question, Howie.
Yeah.
Great. The only other feedback I had, Doug, was about the master plan addition. So we do have the list that Sherry is keeping for us that's attached to the agenda every month. That has our master plan ideas. And then I have an item in the agenda under new business today to talk about master plan potential for addendum. So
Well, that
might help a little bit.
Thank you, Carmen, so much.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. And
Definitely.
anything else? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. Carmen, I'm not sure where I have some questions that are sort of related to projects that would have to deal with the master plans. I'm not sure where you would like me to discuss that.
I
don't know if you noticed, but it looks like Walter has joined us.
Oh, welcome, Walter. Can you hear us?
I'm here.
Hello.
Yay.
Thanks for joining.
I got it to work.
Good job. A question did come up, Walter, earlier about if you got your copy of the master plan.
I have not. I haven't been able to actually go in.
Okay.
Or at least I thought it was locked up, so I haven't gone there.
Sure. Yeah. You're correct. The doors are locked, but we do allow people in by appointment. But we can mail that to you if that would be better.
I mean, if you have time today, I can stop in, like, after I get home.
Well, they'll be closing at 5 in about a half an hour, so that they might not be there at that point in time. But if it would be easier, just let me know, and you can either come in or we'll mail it to you. Just go ahead and send me an email or a message, and we'll get it for you.
Okay, I can do that.
And this is Sue, by the way, that's saying that.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Sue, do you know if they're officially open? Because nobody sent out a notification saying that city offices are open yet.
We are not. It's still
Okay.
by appointment. So yeah.
Okay.
If anybody that wants to stop by can just set up a time, and we'll make sure they can come.
Okay. Thanks.
Or we can hand it out the door or whatever.
Thank you, guys. As far as master plan stuff, Sue, do you want to talk about that at the same time as I talk about the pieces that I had and group it all together?
Yeah, it's just one potential project, and
okay.
Yeah, so just let me know when you
okay
for that.
Okay, we'll get to it soon.
Okay.
Next up is new business 5A, work with city staff on projects and notifications to friends groups. I'm not sure who had that one.
Well, that was something I kind of put in there a while ago, just feeling that we needed to make sure we still have a strong dealing with the city staff to have good communication about our friends groups on what's going on both ways, what we're doing and what they're going to do in our parks. So, you know, that's also something I think at one point Doug had kind of mentioned that he thought that was an important thing for us to have. So that's why I put it on there. What are other people's thoughts on that?
Do we have, I know that there was a document about the friends groups, kind of the details of that Matt was working on. Do we know if that was ever completely finalized and posted anywhere?
I don't know that it's posted, but I think it was finalized. I'll see if I can find a copy of it.
I wonder if there's anything about that in there, or if that would be a good place once we decide on how those notifications should happen, if that should be something we should add. Or if it's
Carmen, there
separate.
is some literature. There is some literature that I read from the city on a document somewhere, and I'm not certain where that came from. And I looked at it, and it was, and I believe it was from Matt.
Yeah.
That he had formatted that in some way, and I can't recall what document it was on.
Yeah.
But it was done very general, and and I saw it as a document that could be improved and worked on like anything else.
I thought he came out with a pamphlet or something.
Somebody's phone. I found that I can email it out to everybody, but under the responsibilities of the city, it says management and tracking of all financial funds. City shall coordinate response to requests for projects and work within the park, communication of friends of group activities to the public when appropriate, and provide tax deduction letters as requested by donors. that's what it's got under the responsibilities of the city.
Okay. Thank you, Sue.
But yeah, I can email that to everybody.
And that's something too that eventually when we do an addendum that we need to make sure that's actually in the master plan is, you know, talking about friends groups and stuff. So
yeah, great
later.
idea.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Do you think that covers what you were looking for, Howard, or were you kind of wanting something else?
I mean, it's stated in there, so I think we, you know, we kind of know what we need to work towards.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Does anyone else have feedback on this topic? All right, let's go on to 5B, weed control in nature parks. Is that you, Jerry?
No.
Oh, I guessed wrong. Ah, Howard.
we have lots of weeds and botanical.
Lynn,
that's what I was
Lynn,
thinking.
would that be you?
It's Howard.
That was
No.
me. That was me again.
I'll touch base on that later.
Well, I'm hoping some input from you too, Lynn. You know, I mean, as I was talking about at the last meeting, that we've got the new shining geranium, which is marching into our parks very heavily, and that, you know, I don't know if it's going to happen this year, but we're starting to think of a couple of trials of different things to try to control like that type of thing. And I more just wanted to let people know about it so that there's no surprises. I kind of talked to Doug Morton, and he seemed to think I should let Thad know, since you're in there now too, Thad, in case you were happen to see it, that we're talking about trying to do some types of tests with solarization where we put plastic down and to try to see if that would try to control this stuff. There's also been discussion of possibly when it's real wet out using a weed torch some, you know. So I don't know what people's thoughts are on that. Doug didn't really have that much of an objection, and Mayor Rick Scholl didn't, but they thought I should run it by everybody just to double check to make sure nobody would have objections on that. And also, you know, when we do get to it, that we probably need to put out some signs just so people would understand why there's a sheet of plastic out or an area looks burned or something, you know. So that's all I wanted to say on that, you know. Any comments from anyone?
Well, you know, Howie, I'm so glad that you talked to Thad about those things. And
well, that's just now. Okay.
that's the go-to person about specific areas in the parks of doing some kind of experimentation or whatever. Just let him know. Yeah. And he's very agreeable. And I hopefully you don't ever have a conflict with those individuals. Remember, they are the people who are responsible for the parks, and that's the most important thing. So,
okay,
just check with him.
Okay.
I think it's a great idea, to tell you the truth, to try new ways of getting rid of these invasive species, because like we can't spray now, so we have to do something different.
Yep. Well, I hand weeded the stairs a while ago, so that's another good way to get rid of weeds in staircases. But yeah, it'd be neat if we could start getting some natural ways to try to start controlling some of our weeds. So that's mainly all I had on that one.
Can you continue to report back on how that's going, Howard? I'd be curious.
Yeah, once we start getting a little bit closer on doing a test patch somewhere, I'll make a report and send some pictures.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I have a comment on what Jacob said. Jacob, you said we can't spray?
I think Howard said that.
I think that was bad.
I said that,
Thad,
Jerry.
yeah.
We don't have anybody with a spraying license right now.
So Thad, when I last month, you said that if I carried a backpack, I could spray for poison oak?
Yes, you can. We just can't use our power sprayer to go out and spray like along the road right of ways or anything. It's all got to be by hand.
Okay, so
trails and things like that.
Got it. You can spray by hand legally.
Yes.
What's
with
the
over
process?
Counter stuff that we use.
What's the process if Jerry and I want to tackle some of that in the botanical gardens? I know, Jerry, you and I talked about that a little bit in last meeting. Should we just reach out
we
to
need
you,
to
Thad?
talk.
You just come over and we'll talk about it, and I can give you the stuff and tell you the whereases and why fors for it. But and know that it's all over the counter, so it's nothing real hazardous, but still you want to be real careful with it. It is chemicals.
Okay. If we do that sort of spraying in the botanical gardens, I mean, the trail is so narrow there. Do we need to post something like at the entrance so that the public knows that we've sprayed? And I don't know, do we need to do anything like that?
Don't spray it when there's blackberries on there. I don't think you want to do that.
Okay.
But,
I'm just thinking of like people walking through, like hands, you know, kids with hands that are out and then immediately go in their mouth because that's what they do.
So, you don't want to use we don't want to have a lot of residue on there. It doesn't take very much, just a few drops. But it's, if I remember right, it's about a 30 minute to an hour absorption time for the plants to absorb it. So, but I would give it even a little bit longer, but you know, it wouldn't hurt to put up a sign that said you're spraying. I mean, that would be.
Thad, will you be available for people who want to spray, like Carmen and Jerry? You'll be available. I got to get this kind of like in my mind. You'll be available to give them guidelines of what to do and possible signage or ribbon or anything like that that they may need for their spraying. Is that correct?
Well, the signage, we'd probably have to farm that out to somebody else. I'm sure she's listening right now, but I see the smirk. Yeah, but if they can catch me off the mower, that'll work.
Thank you.
Sounds good.
I've only got one other minor comment on that. I mean, spraying is good. Sometimes just be careful because there is always collateral damage. If you had some good natives that were growing on the ground, they may not be dormant yet. So just keep that in mind. You know, usually the seed bank is pretty good and it will still really replace those areas. But you still want to think about if there could be something good that you're spraying. If you're spraying poison oak, you still got to spray it before the end of the season when it turns red. But, you know, there's just a fine hairline of the best time to spray it when a lot of the natives have gone down, is all I'm saying.
You have to remember that it's going to, you might kill it to start with, but it's going to come back. It's going to take several applications and sometimes a year or more. But, you know, that's why we say we don't want to use too much chemical either. So you just really need to watch what you do. And just remember, don't grab it.
Good advice.
Yeah, they bite bad. Even when they're dead, they bite bad.
Somebody once said poison oak can get just 7 years down the road, even if it's been dead for 7 years.
Wow.
Yeah, it's not my favorite thing.
Yeah.
Okay. And does anyone else have anything else for the weed control in nature parks? Okay. So let's move on to master plan potential for addendum. So that was mine. I put on there. I was wondering what everybody thought about the feasibility of, because we don't have the manpower to update the master plan for a while and do a full update like we had kind of hoped for. I was wondering if there was openness to potentially doing addendums to the master plan, where maybe once a quarter we create kind of a document of all the items that we've come up with in our list so far and format it kind of in a consistent way with the master plan and add that kind of at the end so that we have the information there. We're not losing it. We're still getting stuff added. Sorry. We're still getting stuff added, but don't have all the effort of doing a full master plan update. So I wanted to get people's feedback and thoughts on that.
And then I think just part of the process is making a recommend. Once you get to that point, making a recommendation to the council hears those recommendations and directs the staff to add it to the master plan. And at that time, the staff will possibly have some feedback, or along the lines, there could be feedback back to the Parks Commission. But once you start that ball rolling, it becomes an action item, and with good ideas, it'll follow through. It just takes a little time.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and you're exactly right, Councilor Morton. It does take time, and Carmen, if I would suggest, if you'd let me suggest, not to try to expect to adopt things once a quarter.
Okay.
I think that is a pretty aggressive timeline to be continually adopting things, because it does take some time to go through those process, gets it on the agenda, get it reviewed by people, etc.
Okay.
But twice a year
Okay.
would seem fairly reasonable. That's still going to be a considerable amount of time that all of you folks will have to spend on looking at things and providing input and potentially getting outside information.
Good idea.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Yeah,
I think it's a good idea.
There's a time factor there. So.
Okay.
Because especially with new areas, it's continually evolving. It might be slow, but it's evolving through the years. So I like that idea.
Okay. And part of what brought that to mind was working on the report to City Council for the parks, and almost in a lot of our kind of minutes that I was looking back on, we mentioned, in order to get grants, we need to have something in the master plan, and stuff needs to be in the master plan to be able to budget for it. And so for all these new ideas that we're coming up with that aren't making it to the master plan because it's from 2017 or further back, I'm just worried that we're going to start getting to a point where we aren't able to get grants for some of these newer ideas because we don't have it in the master plan. So that's kind of one of the reasons I think it would be helpful.
Great idea, Carmen. This is going to give Parks and Trails momentum, and always kind of like moving forward, and addressing issues and visions that I think are very important for our parks.
Okay. So if everybody agrees with that or doesn't have opposition to that, I'd be happy to, before our next meeting, kind of come up with a draft of what an addendum could potentially look like, and maybe pick a couple of the things that are on our list to present that to you guys and see if you guys agree or if we could make modifications. And then once we have like motion to start that process. Do people agree with that idea?
Sounds good to me.
Sounds good.
Okay. Any other feedback on that, Sue? I know that kind of falls to the city to have to eventually make those updates. So if there's any additional feedback you have, that's definitely welcome.
Well, obviously, anything that you can, the more complete those ideas and things are fleshed out, because there's not really a lot of staff that we have to be able to dedicate to fleshing those things out and putting all the costs and things like that to them.
Okay. I will keep that in mind. Thank you. All right. On to the next item, which is reviewing the annual report to the council. Like I mentioned, I've been working on this. I can send it. I don't want to read through it all because it's going to take a while to read through it all, but I had a few items that I had questions on that I wanted to update in here, and then I can send it out to the whole group for you guys to provide feedback. I will be presenting it to the City Council on, I think it's July 15th. Hopefully I have that right, Sherry. So I can get it out to you guys in the next day or two to review, and then please look at your park and see if there's anything else that I missed. And then we'll have plenty of time to get it updated ahead of time. So I'm going to dive into some of my questions. For the BMX park, I know that we got a bunch of dirt donated, and I wanted to put in there who donated that. Is that something that you guys know? Paul?
Yeah, I know that. That's
okay.
It was Kaufman Excavation that donated all that dirt. So
okay.
I mean, yeah, they're responsible for. They paid for all the trucks to have all the trucks deliver everything. So yes,
okay.
They're solely responsible for it.
Thank you. I just wanted to add it more of like a thank you.
Yeah, no,
okay.
that'd be awesome. I sent him a thank you card and stuff, you know,
Okay.
quite a while back, just
Perfect.
from our track, but something from the city certainly would be nice.
Okay, thank you. And then for Campbell Park, I know that we had mentioned that there were going to be timed doors added on the restrooms. Did that happen? Is that complete? Yes.
Oh yeah, that's totally complete. If you haven't seen the restroom, they're still looking good. Nobody's vandalized them too bad yet.
Okay.
But
good.
They're not open right now anyway, so
yeah.
You can check out the porta potty, but
no thanks.
Man, you need to be more positive.
And then another one I had questions on was 6th Street Fields. Do we have any updates over the past year from 6th Street Fields?
On the fields, there's really nothing there but fields.
Okay. I wasn't sure if there was anything to report to City Council on that. I didn't find anything in our notes from past meetings, but I just wanted to double check before I crossed it off.
No,
my list.
Thad, how long ago did you guys replace it was like about a year ago, wasn't it, that you replaced the backstop and the fencing on the...
Yeah, on the far field?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it was about a year ago.
Okay.
So
I think I covered that probably last year. Yeah.
And so was this the first year you used the top dresser on that field?
No, it's the second year, and it's really making a difference.
The
big difference was that we hired a gentleman to trap the moles, and he got them all. So we have a nice field now.
That's good.
It looks great.
Awesome. Another question I had was the status of the bathrooms from Columbia View Park after they were damaged. I know that everything's closed right now, but I wasn't sure if any repairs had been done on that yet.
Well, we painted the doors today. They will be timed lock doors so that when we open up, they will be done. There's still some issues with what they did after the fire, as far as I'm concerned, that didn't get done, but I'm not sure if we will get them done or not.
Okay.
But wait and see.
The bulk of the work is done though.
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay. Thank you. And then Friends of Dalton Lake, you're probably going to give this or overall Dalton Lake update. I imagine we will get this update today about the kiosk being built and if that's complete or not.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is complete.
Okay.
And it's at Public Works. They're storing it.
Great. That's good news. And then is the plastic bench from Trex, is that complete too?
What happens, what the process is, and this was in my update, is you get so many pounds of the plastic turned in, which has been done.
Mm-hmm.
I reported it last week, and the person I report it to then says, you've got your bench coming, and you order it and tell them what color you want, and then it should take about 30 days.
Okay, awesome.
That's the process right now.
Okay, that's pretty fast, 30 days. That's pretty quick.
We started back in February.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
And we should get another one in September.
Awesome. That's exciting. Okay, I'm sure you'll have more updates on once I send this out, Lynn. So feel free to add and send back to me too.
Okay.
And then the other one that I had questions on is Walnut Tree. Do we have any updates on Walnut Tree Park that we want to let the council know about?
No, it's continued to be, it's being mowed, and I should get over there and do some weeding around the tree, but it's looking really good. And people are keeping up the little library with exchanging books, so it looks really nice.
Awesome, thank you.
If you need me to check in on that, I live across the street from it.
Oh, you do? Great.
Yeah. In those Magnolia apartments, or Aerosmith apartments, actually.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's somebody actually that came over and planted flowers too in front of the bench.
Oh, nice.
I see that.
Cool.
But yeah, if you need me to like tend to anything, I can, just shoot me an email.
Okay, thanks, Walter.
And then I think my last question for you guys was about the volunteer forms. I know that we've talked about it in the last couple of meetings, and I think Kathy was working on updating those forms, but I wasn't sure if anyone had heard if those have been finalized.
She said she was in the process because I asked her for the form and I sent it out to the advisory committee members.
Okay.
And I also wanted to post it on the Facebook page for people that wanted to volunteer in the park during our cleanups. So she said she was working on it, but she sent me the one that had been done in January of last year.
Okay, I'll follow up with her on it and see if we have a idea for timing.
And I've got a couple more things for you to mention too, Carmen. We probably should mention the fact about the new 5th Street right-of-way trail, the grant from Nike.
Yep, I have that. I have that in there. Yeah, I have a ton of stuff in here that I'm not talking about just because it would take us forever to get through all the stuff that we've done the past year.
And then the only other one I was going to say is the grant, the little $500 grant that we got from the Portland Garden Club for Mob Hill too. So we got that in there. Okay.
I've got that in there. But yeah, you'll take a look at the document when I send it out and make sure I didn't miss anything else.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good.
Okay, that's all my questions, and I'll get that out to you guys in the next couple of days so you guys can review it. So thank you. Next up is, Sue, I totally missed, you had an update on the master plan and I forgot to.
Yeah, if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
You want me to just jump in? Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not really an update, but wanted to let the Parks Commission people know and see what you're supportive of. But last week,
did Sue freeze for everybody else or just me?
Yeah.
Okay, Sue, you froze.
Frozen in time.
Okay,
there we go.
I think you're back. I heard last
That's a Sue Nelson warp.
Uh-oh. Yeah, everything looked okay on my end. So did you hear any of that?
We just heard last week.
Okay.
And then that was it.
Okay. Last week, we got a notification from the Marine Board that there's grant money available for non-motorized and motorized boating improvements. So we had before the Parks Commission, and it is in the Park Master Plan, had talked about putting some sort of a dock facility at the Gray Cliffs Park.
Yes.
For either motorized, or excuse me, either non-motorized or maybe a combination of motorized and non-motorized facilities. Like a small dock basically out there. And it is in the master plan to put something out there, but we need to move fairly quickly on this because the applications are due by the 1st of July. And what I'm wondering is if the Parks Commission as a whole would be supportive of, because we also need to provide letters of support. If the Parks Commission would be supportive of either option, because we don't know which way would be the best to go. I need to have a conversation with somebody at the Marine Board. And should we just apply for something strictly for non-motorized, or should we go for one of the things that we were discussing just a couple minutes before this meeting started was maybe applying for a grant to do design and engineering and permitting for a slightly larger facility that would accommodate non-motorized and some smaller motorized boats
So
down
I
in
think
that Great Cliffs area.
I have to weigh in on this very heavily, and I think you're opening a huge can of worms if you go to motorized boats in that area. One is that it's going to cost an arm and a leg to get to that, dredge that area out. You'll have trailers and all kinds of other kinds of traffic down in that small parking lot. You'll have maybe some issues with people who might want to try and launch those somehow by hand. It would just be, I just think it'd just be a nightmare if you went to motorized boats.
I don't disagree with that at all, Doug. And my first thought was just strictly non-motorized vessels, but John Walsh felt that there would be more support with the Marine Board if we went for a slightly larger facility. There would be no launching of motorized boats down in that area. It would just be somewhere where boats that were on the river would have an opportunity to come over and dock and maybe use the restroom, or have people who are utilizing Sand Island be able to get back and forth to and from the island a little bit easier. And one of his thoughts was that if we went for that option, one of those things would be, where would that dock be able to be installed that would have the depth to accommodate some smaller boats. So again, I agree with your thoughts there. I was just going with what Mr. Walsh had suggested.
Well, I hate to be an advocate, an anti-advocate to the motorboats, but the motorboats can obviously come up to Columbia View Park, and use those restrooms.
Correct.
Rather than having a whole new facility devoted to, and you know what's going to happen. Any place where you'd have that mixed use kind of thing, it gets into right-of-ways and bowling and all kinds of things, and wakes and all that stuff. I just think that the whole idea of being canoe, kayak, just is a much more practical idea for now. If it wants to develop into that at some time in the future, fine. But now, oh my heavens.
Doug, I agree with you too. I agree with you, Doug, because right now at the courthouse docks, it's, I don't know what there's 4 or 5 homeless boats, and sure as heck they've moved in down there. And we try to get rid of them, and we're having a heck of a time getting rid of them. So if we had a facility down there, it'd just be a bigger can of worms.
Yeah. All of these things are absolutely valid, and I don't disagree with any of them at all. I'm just bringing to you the thoughts of.
Jerry.
Is my hand raised? I thought I raised my hand.
Your hand is raised. I was just letting Sue finish. So
I can't see.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah, we've talked about this a lot of times. And I kind of feel like the same way Thad feels and the same way Doug feels.
I'm with you on this too.
You go to the park down there, and at the far end down there, Doug has been wanting some picnic tables down there for a long time. And I've always wanted a little cove in there with sand, because there's kind of a natural little cove there to begin with. It's shallow. But I think if it was just for non-motorized boats, I think it would just people could come in there with their kayaks and their canoes, and they could launch stuff, and they could carry them down there because there's a gate down there to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
And if people have already got their boat in the water, you know, they launched it somewhere, and, you know, they can still, you know, go to St. Helens Marina.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like to kind of keep it a little more primitive type situation there. That's my feelings. I mean, I could go either way, to be quite honest, but if I had to vote, I would say just non-motorized.
Well, I think you have to probably allow some fishing off there too. That was in the plan from years ago, is that to have a fishing pier there.
Right, and that would obviously be something that I'm sure it would be used for, but the Marine Board, the grant funds don't cover fishing piers, so we would have to submit the grant as some sort of a boating facility.
Well, we can improve the kayak launch pad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with everybody else. I like the idea of non-motorized.
So if well, I'm not sure if it would be the council, but we have to have.
So we just make recommendations, you know?
Yeah, I know, you just make recommendations, but if the council, despite what Councilor Morton, his thoughts are, if the council as a whole wants to move forward with some sort of a motorized and non-motorized facility, would the Parks Commission still want to submit a letter of support for something like that? And it wouldn't be to build the facility, it would be to do the design and permitting for it, if we went in that direction.
I think I would support anything down there, but would prefer it to be non-motorized, just because I think it would be nice to have a dedicated spot for non-motorized.
I agree with that.
But
There's an
I
element
would
of
support
there either. So we don't, with motorized, we don't want them to start thinking that'd be a place to leave your car for the night just to go over to the island, because that parking lot is very small and isn't probably designed for overnight parking.
It's not, and it's signed that there's no overnight parking there. Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good to me.
Do you need us to make a motion or anything, Sue, or is it just
only
signing a letter?
If you, Sherry, I'm not sure if they need a motion.
I'd like to see the Parks Commission weigh in on it. I really would.
Yeah,
and just make a recommendation. If we don't need the recommendation, fine, but make certain you have it, because that means you guys are doing work and you're down on paper, and that's pretty important, I think.
Yeah, I think a
Carmen, I'll
recommendation.
make a motion.
Okay, just real quick before you do, Jerry, I think a recommendation is good, but also whether, if the council moves in one way or the other, because we do need a resolution of the council to support the application for the grant. So even if the council moves in a direction that is against the recommendation, then would you guys still support a letter of support for that Carmen can sign as the chair of the Parks and Trails Commission, even if it moved to a combination of non-motorized and motorized?
Do you want to make a motion, Jerry?
I make a recommendation that the Parks and Trails Commission support a letter to the Oregon Marine Board for a dock, motorized or unmotorized, at Great Cliffs Park.
Seconded. Can I second?
I'll second it.
Okay.
Great Cliffs Waterfront Park.
Great Cliffs. Sue, I was going to add in there, but I don't think you want me to do this. I was going to say in there, but the Parks Commission prefers a non-motorized.
You could make a second motion or
addendum,
a separate motion for that, to make a recommendation one way or the other.
I like that idea.
Me too.
Me
So
too.
let's focus on the first one, which is recommendation that we support and sign a letter for either motorized or non-motorized. So we have Jerry made the motion, Jacob seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those
Aye.
opposed? Okay, nobody opposed. So who wants to make the second motion?
So we'll recommend that the second motion that it be preferably non-motorized.
I'll second it.
Okay, I'm just gonna do opposed. Anyone opposed? All right. Did you get it, Sherry? Are we good?
Yes.
Ish? Okay. Thank you. Awesome. All right. So now I think we can move on to old business. And we have Dalton Lake Nature Preserve update from Lynn.
Okay. I'm going to start with that we met, the advisory committee met Thursday, the 28th. And we had several votes that we needed to have a consensus on. And one was to choose who we wanted the kiosks built by and the benches. And we had the county proposal in front of us, and the fact that Ron Youngberg offered to make the other kiosks. He said it was pretty simple to build, and he would be happy to make the other ones as well. So what happened is we all voted, it was a consensus to have Ron Youngberg build the other kiosks. And I've already sent an email to Casey Garrett, but because he's running for office, I'm not sure when he's going to see that. So I'm going to try and follow up with whoever is looking at his emails and the business that he was taking care of. You wouldn't see those till, well, I'm not sure, but maybe November. So the second vote that we took was to have monthly cleanups start at the preserve, and that would be in June. Because things are growing pretty fast, we need to start pulling and cutting the ivy and the blackberries, and we need to be very careful where we do that too, because of we've got a lot of invasive species, but we also have some rare species in Dalton, and we want to preserve those. So Patrick volunteered to set up with Solve some of these work groups. And so we'll get that shored up and find out when they're going to be. And we can report that not only on Facebook, but to the Parks Commission. And also there's people that have said, well, I can't meet on certain Saturdays and I'd like to help clean up. And they've been saying that for about 6 months. So I thought I could add, we want to go down, my husband and I, and cut the ivy and pull and this and that. So maybe we can work with those people to set that up, make sure they have signed the volunteer release agreement, and get that set up so that each month is covered too. So that's what we're doing there. Let's see. Last Thursday, we met with Sue and Beck from the Public Works Department. And Sue, jump in anytime. And it was a very good meeting, I thought. We made a lot of progress on where we possibly can put the kiosks and the bench and the bike rack. And then we had a second spot chose as well, because if that didn't pan out for some reason when locate comes, then we have another place to put that. And we decided we didn't need to move the gate. And Sue was looking with Buck about a couple of parking spaces. Just as you enter from Columbia City on 4th Street, it would be on the left and right near the entrance there. And it would be head in, and they'd use gravel, is my understanding, Sue?
Uh-huh.
So that was pretty exciting for us too, to possibly get at least 2 parking spots there. And we also had, we talked about a metal sign that we would like placed at the south entrance to Rutherford Parkway, because as I've mentioned before, we don't have any signs up yet. A lot of people don't know it's a preserve. So as you start walking on the Rutherford Parkway, park your car and you start walking on that walkway, there'll be a sign that says beginning of the Rutherford Parkway and connection to the Dalton Lake Nature Preserve, 0.4 miles. And we actually measured that when we walked that day. So that'll be really nice to get. And let's see here. Yeah, and as I said, we sent out the volunteer release agreements to the advisory committee members. And in order, when you were talking about weeding and control of invasives, in order to mitigate the mowing or weeding that could disturb unique flowers in the preserve, Lona and Deborah, part of the advisory committee, came up with a sign, and they've got 3 signs now that were just laminated. They were printed off. We couldn't get them made really quick, but they were laminated, and you'll see it as you go in the entrance and on the overlook. And it says Dalton Lake Nature Preserve at the top, and restoration in progress in big letters. Do not disturb vegetation. And we're going to be marking some of the areas that we don't want mowed or changed in any way where these species are. But what we need to do is work with the vector control, because they come in with a brush hog and do mowing. In fact, there was some weed eating up on the bluff. And so that's what we're trying to prevent is we want to collaborate with vector control. So we'd like to get a meeting between vector control, Sue, Doug, possibly, but I'll get everybody together with Chip and Deborah, who is part of the committee, because they've already done a meeting with vector control just as a fact-finding meeting on what they do, when the spraying happens, how they decide where they're going to mow. Because as you know, some of the weeds that are in there spread rapidly when they're mowed. They're sprayed everywhere. And so hopefully that'll happen soon. And so we'll all get together and find out when we can meet and see if we can't do that collaboration on getting the ivy out of there, the blackberries, and some of the other invasives, so they won't just have to mow. So that, as I said, the Trex bench order is in process. That should be in another month. I talked to Paul, and Paul, jump in anytime if, yeah, you're still here. That is still in progress, and the bike rack should probably be ready maybe in about a month. Is that what you were saying, Paul?
I think his phone disconnected.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he was just telling me that they're meeting tomorrow, and he should have an answer by then. So I could send out something to you if you'd like, Carmen, to let you know that. Okay.
Okay, that's fine. I just wasn't sure if it was done or not. I was going to mark it in there, but yeah.
Sometimes the grants take a little while, and they had another project, I understand, in that grant. So it's all those decisions will be made tomorrow.
Okay.
And let's see, one more thing. Deborah Brumacombe volunteered to write an article on the preserve and submit it to the City of St. Helens e-newsletter. we're going to do that as well. And I think that's about it for now.
I just had a question about the parking. Is that something that we should take to Columbia City council meeting or anything like that? I know you've
It
taken.
wouldn't be in Columbia city limits.
Okay. I just know that Lynn's taken stuff there before to give them kind of a heads up on things. And I wasn't sure if that would be a big enough thing to do that. It
probably wouldn't be a bad idea to let them know what we propose. And in fact, tomorrow I need to talk to somebody at Columbia City, so I can potentially mention it to her then.
Okay, that'd be great.
I know you'll get pushback from the 4th Street residents. That's that to me. I mean, every one of those residents is like opposed to any kind of new traffic coming in, and I know that for sure.
And I think that's actually what the call to Columbia City is. They called and did they just leave a message for you, Thad?
Yes, she left a message, and what they were talking about was the brush growing so high and worried about it being a fire hazard.
Oh, good.
Okay. Along the fence line. So we actually, when I was out with Lynn last week, we talked to Buck about that.
That's probably the same person that called here about the same thing.
Yeah.
I have one question for, and I'm not certain, Sue, and I think maybe you can get on top of this, but as I look at any of the maps or charts that I have for sailing and around, the Botanical Gardens is on the chart, or all the parks are on the chart, but Dalton Lake is left off. So if we want to put Dalton Lake into any of our maps, nationwide maps or charts, I think it should be there, especially on Google Maps or something like that. Dalton Lake Nature Preserve. I think that's all part of that. So anyway, I just thought I'd bring that up.
Thanks, Doug.
Carmen, can you see my hand?
I can. Go ahead, Jerry.
I have 2 questions. Sue, you were talking about putting in 2 parking spots. When we talked about it last time, you said that the fire department must be able to turn around down there.
Yes.
And I take it that's taken care of.
Yes, these would be off the side of the road before you get to the little access that goes down into the preserve.
It before the gate, Sue?
Yes. So.
And okay. And I figured that was the case. I figured it was safe. So, Lynn, what are the endangered plants or the rare plants that you want to save there at Dalton Lake?
Well, yes, there's a list of those, and that was done about 6 years ago. And I believe there was over 150 different itemized plants and trees. And of course, Lona, who helped develop that list, is with us all the time and pointing out where these different plants are. And I said, you know, we really need to mark this, you know, especially around on the road, because, and again, that's why we want to collaborate with Vector Control. So they are aware of where this is. And we can talk about if that's a problem for them, or, you know, how we could get around that.
So Lona's the one that picked these plants out and these locations then.
Her and about 5 other people. They did this 6 years ago for the city.
You know, I think it's very interesting to go to nature parks and have signage with little signs that are possibly 6 inches, 8 inches, 10 inches long. They set low, and the name of the species. And the Latin name possibly as well. But I always think that that's very interesting. I try to go up and learn those names and get an association with it, and in a sense get a perspective of what we have in our park. So we know. I'd like to see that happen at some time.
That's in my original proposal.
Exactly.
So yes, we need to do that. And we need grant money to do that as well. So that's coming up.
Thank you. Patrick, did you have some feedback?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I had information specifically about the plants I wanted to say. So that walk, I participated in that walk a number of years ago. If you go to the Dalton, Friends of Dalton Lake Nature Preserve Facebook page, under documents or archives, the listing of all those, that plant list is there, as well as the listing of all the birds that have been identified by a couple of bird watchers. And just one specific plant, the one at the bluff, our Columbia lily, which on the bluff years ago, that was overrun with blackberry. And after a couple of work parties, including one which Lynn participated in, cleared out, it's becoming a nursery for Columbia lily. And the good intention, it was a good intention, I understand, weed whacking the bluff. It was done with very good intent. And fortunately, it stopped right before the Columbia lily nursery. But it was kind of a scare because this is a relatively rarer plant, but beautiful plant. And it's able to grow precisely because of the restoration work that's going on. And so I just wanted to let you know that documentation is available on the Facebook page.
Thank you, Patrick. Anything else related to Dalton Lake? All right. Last on our list is master plan additions. Does anyone have anything that you want to add to the master plan ideas document based on today's meeting? All right. And next is discussion items. Does anyone have anything to cover for discussion items or other business?
I talked to the softball people. Rob is the president of the softball league. I just asked him how would he feel about turf on the infield, and would they be willing to help if the city was to come up with something to do turf. And he was like, yeah, definitely. Cool. He didn't give me how much finances they had, but we talked for probably a good 45 minutes about it. He's like, the field needs it, even if it's just the infield.
Great.
So I did reach out to them, and they said they're willing to help.
Thank you.
No problem.
Great. Howard, I think you had your hand up.
Yep. I just wanted to give a quick update. Nob Hill basically have weed-eated most of the trails in there, and probably over the next month we'll be widening them out. I also did mow the entire New Fifth Street right away the other day because it was so tall that it was actually, when it was wet, was going all the way across the trail, just in case anybody's in there. That's who's been doing all the weed eating. And a few weeks ago, hand weeded the stairs also coming up from down below, all the little gravel spots behind it. So just wanted to throw that one out there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Howard.
Okay.
All right. Going once, going twice. Anything else?
Sold.
All right. Meeting adjourned.
Another great meeting. Way to go.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for everybody.
Take care.
Thank you, Carmen.
Yep.
I will not
Bye.
be the one in July.